Jim Marshall is running the wrong way. Cut out of the air by Franco Harris. Jerry Rice, touchdown, 49ers.
Hi, I'm Steve Sable, and welcome to They Never Gave Up. And in the world of pro football, that phrase, that shines like a badge of courage. Take quarterback Jim Plunkett. In the beginning, it all came so easily. At Stanford, he set collegiate passing records, and as the #1 draft choice of the Patriots, he had a sensational rookie season. Then Plunkett's career hit the skids. Eventually, he was picked up by the Raiders. And the quarterback, who everyone thought was finished, made the most of his fresh start. You see, bouncing back from adversity was something that Jim Plunkett learned to do as a little boy.
When I was very young, I was playing in a recreational softball game, and I was up to bat, and I certainly wasn't very good. And the recreation leader pitched a couple of balls, and I swung and missed both of them. So I had 1 strike left, and the guy said, "Now look it, you swing the bat when I tell you to swing after I pitch the ball." So he pitched the ball, and he told me to swing when I was halfway there, and so obviously I missed it and I struck out. But I guess I vowed or promised to myself that I'd never let that happen again. I'd never be taken advantage of like that, and it kind of spurred me on to work and to become better at whatever I did, especially athletically.
This refusal to accept failure made Plunkett a Heisman Trophy winner, a college all-star, and a rookie drawing card in the NFL.
He was the #1 draft choice. The Patriots were going into a new stadium. The Patriots used him to try to fill up that new stadium. He come out of the All-Star game. He come right in preseason, and they put him in there.
With New England, Plunkett enjoyed instant success. In 1971, he threw a record 19 touchdown passes and won Rookie of the Year honors. But after demonstrating his sweet skills, Plunkett's luck and career turned sour.
I think when I was a rookie, I caught people by surprise, the way I could run, scramble, throw on the run. The following year, you know, I didn't fool anybody.
He took some beatings that were just tremendous. I mean, he got killed. And I think that scarred him. You know, he had a great first year, but then he started to wear down.
When I first got in this league, I had a Rookie of the Year. I thought it was going to be a piece of cake the rest of the way. It just didn't turn out to be that way, unfortunately. Things fell apart rapidly, got injured, got traded to San Francisco. I wanted that to really work out because I played at Stanford. I probably put too much pressure on myself wanting to succeed. And the harder I worked, the farther behind I got. It was pretty rough out there. I got beat up quite a bit. I was hurting pretty good. I didn't perform all that well when I had the opportunity. And that was the most miserable 2 years of my professional career at San Francisco, unfortunately. I was really mentally beat up, that's for sure. And I really thought about quitting before the season ended. Fortunately, I was talked out of it. I got released, and a couple of weeks later, I signed with the Raiders. And I'm very glad and lucky that I did, and it gave me a new life.
But Plunkett's rebirth was a difficult process.
Emotionally, he was down, and his throwing action had changed from being rushed so much and things. And we just gave him a year to be back to Jim Plunkett's earlier level.
Plunkett gradually regained his confidence. Then he replaced an injured Dan Pastorini 5 games into the 1980 season. Plunkett had received a lucky break, but his talent did the rest. He directed the Raiders to 13 victories in his 15 starts and was named Comeback Player of the Year. His arm was still strong, and he threw picture-perfect passes, though at times his passing style was not exactly suitable for framing.
Wasn't pretty, but he got the job done. Guy was phenomenal as far as his ability to make things happen. And you knock him down, you beat him up, but it seemed like his guy coming back from out of the grave. He'd rise, rise and rise to the occasion.
Big game occasions brought out the best in Plunkett, who guided the Raiders to 8 postseason wins. Plunkett helped the Raiders triumph in 2 Super Bowls, and he was the most valuable player of Super Bowl 15 as he capped off his remarkable 1980 comeback campaign by throwing 3 touchdown passes. Of fate had thrown Jim Plunkett plenty of curveballs, but his vow never to strike out again enabled him to rebuild a broken career into a monument to courage and determination.
I had a tough time, there's no question about it. And it was a rocky road for me, but you get a lot of internal fortitude from the kind of career I had. Believe me, one minute you're up on top, the next minute you're not quite so high. And, I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to bounce back. I wish I didn't have to bounce back as many times, obviously, but I was able to. And I don't know all the reasons, but, I'm glad I stuck it out.
Another quarterback who never gave up was Norm Snead, one of the NFL's most prolific passers. He was also one of the game's most well-traveled players. He played for 5 different teams and faced many challenges during a career that spanned 2 decades.
For 16 NFL seasons, quarterback Norm Snead was the league's wandering gypsy, drifting from one town to another. Despite his nomadic nature, Norm logged nearly as much mileage with his passing arm as he did by airplane.
I played for a lot of different teams. I was Washington, Philadelphia, Minnesota for a year, the Giants, San Francisco, and back to the Giants. And I think the biggest asset, based on the situations, nobody likes to play for that many different teams, it was I had staying power and I could play.
Norm made every travel stop a memorable one. When he finally retired from the game, only 4 other quarterbacks had thrown for more career yardage than Norman Snead. When Norm began his career with Washington in 1961, much of his traveling was done going backwards. As the first rookie quarterback in NFL history to start all his team's games, Snead was thrown to the Wolves, or thrown for big losses as leader of a struggling Redskins attack.
You make mistakes by not throwing the ball when you should and hanging on to it and trying to make things happen, and it made everyone else look bad. And that's the problem with a rookie playing. I tried to emulate some players when I was coming along. I watched Unitas and how he threw the ball high. And I watched the Sammy Baugh, and I tried to do things that they did.
Johnny U and Slingin' Sam Norm would never be. But he overcame the Redskins' deficiencies well enough to become 1961 NFL Rookie of the Year. After 3 productive seasons in the nation's capital, all signs pointed to a long and prosperous career in Washington for the talented young quarterback. But in 1964, Norm Snead's world was forever altered by one of the most stunning trades in sports history. Snead was on his way to Philadelphia in exchange for future Hall of Famer Sonny Jurgensen, a trade that did not meet with approval in the Quaker City.
And I think all of Philadelphia was in shock. We knew Norm Snead. We played against him twice every year. Norm Snead was a pretty good player. And I don't want to undermine Norm Snead, but he was no Sonny Jurgensen. Sonny Jurgensen was something special. But, of course, there was more involved in it than that. Sonny and Joe Kriaric were not getting along. And there were some off-the-field extracurricular activities Sonny was having some problems with and all that. And I think all of that entered into it. But to trade Sonny Jurgensen even up for another quarterback, whoever it happened to be, placed, in my judgment, an intolerable burden on who that quarterback coming in happened to be. And unfortunately, it happened to be Snead.
Maybe it was a good thing for Norm, too, because he had been thrust on the field as a rookie without the surrounding cast that a young quarterback needs. And there's no question, no, he could throw the ball. He just needed surrounding people. So it was good for him to get out and start fresh.
Snead's grace period in Philadelphia was not a long one. The Eagles weren't much better than the Redskin team Norm left behind. And the double burden of an unpopular trade and limited supporting talent kept Snead under the microscope throughout his playing days with the Eagles.
I never thought the Philadelphia press was any rougher or tougher than any other place, or the fans for that matter. I think the fans are good fans. All they want was a winner, and they like for you to play well and win. And that's what the game's all about anyway, and if you're able to do that, they respond to you very well. If you don't, you know, they boo Santa Claus and all that sort of thing.
Norm teased the crowds like a burlesque fan dancer, showing little of substance one season, then exploding for 29 touchdown passes the year after. This created a classic love-hate relationship between Snead, the fans, and his teammates.
I will say this for Norm, as a receiver of his, there were times when Norm was so on in a ball game that I felt that I had never run a pass pattern for a better quarterback in my entire life. And then there were other games when it didn't look like he was the same guy, and I never could figure out whether that was a mental thing or what.
When Eagles' fortunes finally hit rock bottom, Snead became the designated scapegoat and was shipped out to Minnesota. Despite joining a contender, Norm's days with the Vikings were not happy ones.
Bud Krant and I didn't see eye to eye, and we just didn't hit it off. So he played, you know, other people. I started 4 games, and Gary Quazzo started about 5 or 6, and Bob Lee started 4 or 5 games. So we got in the playoff, and there was a lack of leadership, and it hurt us. And then I was traded to the Giants, and I was able to take advantage of a situation, and I was able to utilize that system. And it was a fun year. When my father came to visit me at Yankee Stadium, we took him to practice on a Saturday morning. He walked out to center field and he saw the statues, and he was standing out there with tears running down his eyes. He said, "This has got to be the greatest thrill in the world, just to even play in this stadium."
In the 12th season of his career, Norm Snead finally struck gold. He led the 72 Giants to their first winning record in a decade and became the top-ranked passer in all of football. After 3 seasons in New York, Snead packed his bags again, this time for San Francisco, where at the age of 37, the old pro showed he could still throw for distance and accuracy. Even in those final years, Norm could send the ball for a long, majestic ride.
My arm probably was the greatest asset that I had, in the sense that I could throw it. I had perseverance, stand power, and I was strong, and I could play hurt. And I think wherever I was at that particular time, I was able to play. And they tried to write me off for a long, long time.
Snead overcame a controversial trade and numerous rejections to survive and even prosper for 6 different teams. In the end, this wandering gypsy found a home wherever he was given one more chance to drop back and put the ball in flight.
In 1957, the underdog Detroit Lions faced a confident San Francisco squad in the Western Division playoff. But by vowing never to give up, the Lions roared back in one of the most amazing comebacks of all time.
The Lions' chances for victory seemed slim against the explosive 49ers. And the slaughter that followed the opening kickoff was not surprising, for the Lions were playing without quarterback Bobby Lane. And the 49ers, led by the passing of Y.A. Tittle and the running of Hugh McElhaney, rolled up a 24-7 halftime lead.
San Francisco was so confident that they were going to win the ball game that I think that they had brought champagne to the locker room. And the 2 locker rooms in Old Kezar Stadium were just about 10 feet apart, the doors where you went into the locker rooms. And naturally, if I was ahead on a team 24-7, I think we'd be celebrating. And I think that's what San Francisco was doing. And I think that we heard a little bit of the celebration and then found out later from some of the players that they weren't drinking the champagne, naturally, but they were very confident they were going to be opening the champagne, and that their wives had already spent the championship money for fur coats and houses and cars and so on.
I suppose we were happy as could be at 24-7 to be leading, and Christensen probably heard that and figured that we thought the game was over. At the start of the third quarter, Tittle was our quarterback. He threw a pitch out to Hugh McElhaney, who proceeded to dance for about 65 yards.
In spite of McElhaney's big gain, it was soon evident that the 49er wave was cresting.
I took it down to the 9-yard line, and I don't remember if I ran out of gas or they caught up with me, but I got down to the 9-yard line. I really believe that if I would have went in to score at that time, that would have been the end of the game. I don't think they would have been able to catch up with us.
With Tobin Rote at quarterback, the Lions launched one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history. Detroit's defense, led by linebacker Joe Schmidt, held the 49ers scoreless for the rest of the game.
We started blitzing much more than we had in the first half, and really the 49ers became conservative. And I don't know why. I think that they would have maintained what they had the first half, continued on the same offensive premise, that we would have been in trouble, but they sort of laid on the lead. And I think for that reason, we came on and we won the ball game.
A kid by the name of Tom Tracy, a fine back for Detroit, knocked us cattywampus by running about 50 yards in with a winning touchdown to beat us 31-27. The follow-up tragedy, we didn't know at the time, the Browns that year had a weaker ball club than Paul Brown usually had, and Detroit beat them like 56 with Bobby Lane, 56-14 or something. So had we gotten in 1957, if we'd gotten in there, we could, you know, had a good chance to beat the Brownies and win it all. But it had to be the most quiet damn locker room you'd ever find. You know, what can guys say when you lose? Everybody feels lousy. Everybody loves a winner in this game, and nobody, fan, coach, players, nobody can tolerate a loser. And every Sunday, half the teams play and lose. It's crazy.
Terry Bradshaw was a Louisiana country boy who seemed so naive that at first his teammates nicknamed him the Bayou Bumpkin. But Terry never gave up. He made a slow but sweet trip from country outhouse to big-time penthouse when he became the first quarterback to ever win 4 Super Bowls.
Throw it 80 yards, I could knock tacklers off, and I could outrun linebackers, and had a head full of blonde hair and muscles, and plus I read my Bible and said yes sir, no ma'am, and I was a polite youngster. I didn't know any better. That's just the way I was raised, and then the National Football League just wasn't ready for this guy, this Ozark Ike from this little college.
If raw natural ability was all it took, then the transition from the bayous of Louisiana to the Badlands of the NFL would have been easy for Terry Bradshaw. Pro football's #1 draft choice in 1970 was thought to be the savior of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But when the raw-boned rookie made bonehead mistakes, he was labeled a hayseed who could find a needle in a haystack before he could discover a defense.
My first 2 or 3 years here, Terry was terrible. Terry would give the ball away. Terry would throw the ball in the stands. Terry would call the wrong play. Terry would jump off sides. How does a quarterback jump off sides? And that's a good one, right? But Terry could pull that off. Terry accounted for some big defensive tape film reels. Played a lot of defense. Played a whole lot of defense.
When I was not an overnight success and we didn't win and I was struggling with the football team, people couldn't understand why, because physically I looked like I should be awesome. Finally, it just came out, hey, this guy's not too sharp, not too smart. He got benched, so he's stupid. He's not very smart. And then they would talk to players, and did he stutter in the huddle? Yeah, he stuttered in the huddle. This backs it up, and he threw interceptions throwing across the field. Oh, this is dumb to do. And before you know it, I'm dumb.
Everybody could come out, you know, he's a dumb quarterback. He did this, he did that. The dumbness, I think, is a lot of talent, because he may make dumb decisions, but he has so much ability, such a rocket arm, that he feels that he can squeeze that ball in that little crack.
Unbridled, playing it free and easy, Bradshaw was at his best. But in the early years, head coach Chuck Noll pulled hard on the reins.
Terry has a lot of raw talents where he can improvise a lot, you know, but Chuck said, no, we're going to do it this way, do it this way.
Terry wanted to do things his way, and Chuck Chuck is saying, it's my team. I'm going to do it my way.
To be honest with you, I don't think Chuck handled Terry right. Took a lot of frustrations out on Terry. He'd yell at him when he would come to the sidelines. He would yell at him in meetings.
I couldn't stand him. He used to grab me on the sidelines, jerk me up and down, and put me in a game, pull me out, cuss me out on the sidelines in front of all the players. By him doing all this, they naturally had no respect for me.
Terry really needed to be patted on the rear, slapped on the back.
Finally went to him and said, look, if you'll pat me on my butt just one time, I'll kill for you. That's all you got to do. So for 5 years there, I don't think he enhanced my game at all. He tore me down so much that I had to fight to overcome all that.
Finally, Bradshaw turned winters of discontent into seasons of fulfillment. He began to sidestep critics as easily as he stepped out of tackles and helped shape the Steelers into a dynasty in the 1970s. He was the best bad weather quarterback of all time and the most feared in foul weather or fair.
I hated playing against Terry Bradshaw more than any quarterback in the league. I thought he was capable of greater things as a quarterback than any quarterback playing.
He'd go back to pass the football and drop the damn thing and bounce it right back up in his hands and never miss a step. You know, just a phenomenal athlete that can be running to his left and throw to the right just like he was standing still.
I always had great respect for Terry Bradshaw. I think he was a kind of a wild, you know, uncontrollable quarterback, and I think when the Steelers realized that and let him go, then they won their 4 Super Bowls.
When the game was on the line, I just dearly just loved it. I just felt so comfortable, and the challenge just excited me so that I was beside myself, and yet I was always seemed to be under control. Nothing ever bothered me. I just loved the big game.
Now Bradshaw pumping, firing downfield. There goes Stallworth. He pulls it in at the 30, the 20. Touchdown, Pittsburgh. Listen to this crowd.
4 Super Bowl victories vindicated Terry Bradshaw. No longer the dummy, the little Abner in cleats. He was a champion and arguably the best quarterback ever.
Plunkett, Snead, the underrated Lions, and the misunderstood Terry Bradshaw. They showed everyone. Down, but never out. These players reached their peak by never giving up. I'm Steve Sabol. Thanks for watching.